Okay, I think we can start now. So, good
Okay.
morning, everybody. Good afternoon for some of the colleagues if they're there. So, welcome to today's webinar on IOM's work on protection mainstreaming. My name is Erhan, and I work as a protection officer here in IOM HQ in DOE. And today we have our colleagues with us supporting this webinar. Next to me, I have Van, who is part of the global CCCM support team based in IOM HQ here in Geneva. And over the line, we have Laura Nistri, who is now the regional data hub coordinator at ARO Nairobi. She is working on different data systems related to analysis and tracking of mixed migration flows in Eastern Horn of Africa region. And before her current role, she was based in Iraq, working for the DTM team. So Van and Laura today are going to share their experience with regards to protection when it comes to CCCM and DTM. And over the line, we also have Ismail, who is from SDL, from Staff Development and Learning, who is kindly supporting us with all the technical aspects of this webinar. For your kind information, if you cannot see us at the moment, the webinar is being recorded, and we're going to be sharing with you and for your dissemination for other colleagues as well. Now, to begin with, now I'm going to share my screen and start with the presentation. Okay. So in terms of the agenda today, first we are going to be talking about the guidance note on how to mainstream protection in IOM crisis response, so the IN 232. And then we will go through the definition of what protection mainstreaming is and talk about briefly on key protection mainstreaming principles. Then we will have some examples on CCCM and DTM, and we will briefly talk about what resources and tools we have internally for IOM. And in the end part, I think now you're able to write through the chat some questions or comments. So in the last part, we will be able to have a Q&A briefly. So to begin with, in IOM we have an internal guidance note on how to mainstream protection across IOM crisis. This is IN 232. This document is the document that gives us guidance on when we want to mainstream protection in different IOM sectors. It entered into force in 2016, early 2016, and the compliance with this instruction is mandatory. It provides us guidance for different principles, their definitions, examples, and it provides some standards in assessing, designing, developing, endorsing, implementing, or M&E side of projects. And it has very practical annexes, which are tools, which I'm going to be talking about later on as well. So it has 5 different annexes for us to help when we want to mainstream protection. So with regards to the definition of what protection mainstreaming is, in our guideline, which is in line with global protection clusters approach and definition, because in IOM we adhere to the global protection cluster definition. So protection mainstreaming is defined as the inclusion of humanitarian protection principles into crisis response. So this means that taking into account those key principles when designing different projects in different sectors. Here is the AMCOF sectors of intervention. As you know, we have migration crisis operational framework, which defines 15 different sectors of intervention, sectors of assistance for IOM, from camp management and displacement tracking to psychosocial support, land and property support, so all sectors that we're working in. And the idea here is that protection should be mainstreamed in all these sectors. So we have already discussed that protection mainstreaming is the inclusion of all those protection mainstreaming principles. Then what are those principles, quickly? So we have key for protection mainstreaming principles: prioritize safety, dignity, and avoid causing harm, secure meaningful access, ensure accountability, ensure participation, and empowerment. So these are the 4 different principles that we need to be integrating into our programming when we mainstream protection. So now I'm going to go through quickly each of them and give an overall definition and some examples. To begin with, prioritizing safety, dignity, and avoid causing harm. This means in practice that our IOM services and assistance are delivered in a way that preserve the physical integrity of communities and individuals that we work with, and then our assistance and services are culturally appropriate, and we avoid any unintended negative consequences that might occur upon our intervention. So, as an example, this would mean if we have an NFI distribution project that we should pay special attention to the location of the distribution point and its timing. So we would aim not to make any distribution very late so that this doesn't create any safety problems for our beneficiaries. Or we should be having adequate crowd controlling in place so that all potential vulnerable groups can easily have access to our services, be it a single-headed household, a persons with disabilities experiencing mobility challenges, or a person or an older person can come and have access to IOM NFIs in a dignified manner. And moreover, the items that we are distributing shall also be culturally appropriate. If it's food out of non-NFIs, if it's food items, then we should pay attention that people are actually able to cook and eat it, which they are used to. So to make it culturally appropriate. So this was all about, in a very brief, about prioritizing safety and dignity, avoiding any unintended negative consequences. When it comes to the second principle, which is securing meaningful access, here maybe we need to underline the word meaningful. So it is not only access, but it is to make sure that the access is meaningful. And what it means in practice is that the services and assistance that are delivered are based on the needs, and they are adequate in scale, meaning that they are enough for the targeted population. They are within safe and easy reach. They are known by people and accessible for all groups, including all at-risk profiles. So this would mean in practice that we would pay attention to make sure that our assistance is enough for the targeted group, and that we do not discriminate any group over another, and make sure that who needs it most have access to it. The other aspect of meaningful access is physical and financial accessibility of assistance and services we provide without any barrier. As an example, if affected communities have to pay transportation costs to access to IOM services, then this means in practice that although the service itself is not free of charge, for people there is still a fee, so which can create a financial barrier. So on some occasions, then we consider transportation assistance linked to our existing services, so that we make sure that all the targeted beneficiaries can easily have access to it. Like, for example, when IOM provides school transportation, actually what we're doing is we're removing a barrier in accessing to education. The other very important aspect when it comes to securing meaningful access is the fact that the assistance and services we provide should be known by the potential beneficiaries. And in certain contexts, it is even challenging for us as humanitarians to fully know what is available out there. So we are always working on 3Ws, 4Ws, and the same is valid for the affected communities as well. Simply, when we are not aware of these services, or when beneficiaries or the affected communities are not aware of these services, it simply doesn't exist for them. So our job from protection mainstreaming point of view is to make sure that people know what is existing where, and they have access to those services, and they learn about these services in a language that they speak, that they understand, and in a simplified way. This would also mean in practice, if the literacy rate of the targeted community is low, then we should avoid using very wordy documents. Maybe we should apply more visual materials with pictures to make sure that everybody understands and our services are known by all people. This is about securing meaningful access. So when it comes to ensuring accountability from protection point of view, the idea here is that we should be able to measure the quality of our intervention, and we are going to be doing it by receiving and addressing concerns and complaints from the affected communities. And in the end, the overall aim is going to be improving or making challenges in our policies, programming, project activities. So in practice, depending on different realities of the field, so there can be different approaches to be able to get those concerns and complaints. So this could be through post-distribution monitoring, through hotlines, suggestion boxes if it works, structured surveys, focus group discussions, or community consultations with key informants, or in some contexts we have community-based structures that are already established, which can be utilized for the key is to make sure that we integrate a two-way communication between IOM and our beneficiaries. So meaning that as long as we are able to communicate with our beneficiaries, there should be also channels for them to provide us feedbacks. And while doing it, it is also critical to reach out to different segments of the community. So not only relying on the community leaders or key informants, but also making sure that we talk to diverse groups of women, men, girls and boys, children, persons with disabilities, older persons, with an inclusive approach. One other aspect that is critical for ensuring accountability is making sure that our own staff members who are working in the field, who are in contact with the beneficiaries continuously, are aware of their responsibilities as humanitarian workers, meaning that making sure that our staff members are trained on IOM standards of conduct and our zero tolerance policy on sexual exploitation and abuse. And as said, the last point is going to be making necessary changes in our programming when we receive feedback and concerns, complaints from affected communities. The last part, the last principle is ensuring participation and empowerment. So when it is about participation, we should know that participation, first of all, is a right. We all have right to participate in the community that we are living in. And the affected communities and individuals are themselves face the daily challenges of being displaced. And this would also put them in the best place to provide some suggestions or solutions to the challenges or problems that they face. They will know if they are safe or whether they have adequate access to existing services, for example. So, yes, in a crisis setting, individuals will have different vulnerabilities, or there will be different factors which negatively contribute to different vulnerabilities or coping resilience of the affected communities. But it is crucial to acknowledge that people will also have capacities with them. So they will have different skills, their previous education, competences will all are all there to act also as capacity. So our role in participation and empowerment is that we build on those capacities of the communities and reinforce self-protection capacities that are existing out there. As an example, if in a camp setting, if there are different ethnic groups, we should be paying attention that as long as we consult with the majority ethnic group, we should also be finding different ways of talking to minority ethnic groups and taking their concerns into consideration when designing our projects and programs. And I think that is in a nutshell what I want to say about protection mainstreaming principles. Very quickly, I think now we can go back to our lovely guests who agreed to be part of this webinar today. As I said, next to me I have Van, who is part of the global CCCM support team. Van, can you tell us about, from your experience with regards to CCCM, how do you make sure that protection concerns are taken into consideration in our CCCM projects in different parts of the world?
Right. Thank you, Ahan. So CCCM, or Camp Coordination and Camp Management, for some of you who may not be so familiar with the work that we do, one of our key responsibilities and objective is to ensure access to services and protection for the displaced population during their displacement. So we do operate anyway on a foundation that focuses on participation, ensuring common standards, and engaging and set up of some form of community structures, sometimes called governance structures, sometimes community structures, depending on the kind of setup that we're working in. We're currently, the global team here actually is currently engaged in a project that look at mainstreaming of gender-based violence prevention and mitigation effort throughout a few of our key technical areas, with CCCM being kind of at the forefront, but we're also working with the shelter team as well as a DTM team here. So the work we do can be divided into a few areas. One is that we look at participation, in particular kind of women participation in camp governance structure. Then we also look at mainstreaming in all the activities and guidance and kind of training materials and other operations. Then we also look at support to people who are already focused on this work. We support GBV AOR, for example, in their operations. And then we also carry out training of trainers in different regions, and then look at kind of doing common action points within the country that we're training of. Oh, hello. Sorry. where we carried out the TOT, looking at developing common action points between different sectors, between CCCM actors, shelter, protection, MHPSS. So these are like some of the key activities that we're focusing on. Maybe for today, we can talk a little bit more about women participation. Some of the key, I mean, obviously, in displacement situation, especially in camp context, the risk for GBV, it tends to be higher. Like high density living, often without kind of livelihood activities, and potentially without kind of identified durable solutions to look forward to. And we also looked at the fact that increased risk for women and girls living in camps can also maybe be mitigated by encouraging women to be a lot more active and have meaningful engagement within the camp governance structures. At the moment, we've carried out, so we're working with the Women Refugee Council, WRC, and developed women participation toolkits. We've been piloting the toolkits in 5 different countries in the first phase. We're currently, in the second phase. In the third phase, which we're currently in, we're looking at expanding of this into a few more countries, and then maybe building up on the work in some countries as well. But like we've been working in Nigeria, in South Sudan. We're looking at expanding into Afghanistan. So the toolkit the pilot often include conducting a baseline study, implementing of the toolkit, engaging, which usually involve workshops and trainings, doing more focus group discussions, identifying the kind of challenges that will prevent women to participate in the kind of day-to-day of camp governance, and other informal kind of structures. And then also later conducting end-line studies towards the end of the pilot. We're also looking at developing online platform that will encourage practitioners working in CCCM, and particularly looking at women participation, to share tools and experience and lessons learned and best practices. So that's kind of like where we're currently heading. Obviously, we're also, mainstream all these kind of findings into the training materials and package at the global level as well, that we're hoping to carry out more next year. Are there anything in particular else?
Yeah, maybe I can give an example from a recent visit to Bangladesh, where at the moment there are some relocations happening because of the monsoon is coming. So there, what I saw is that so colleagues in site management in CCCM work with protection teams in the identification of vulnerable individuals or families which would need extra support during the relocation. So this is also a way of how we mainstream protection in CCCM, taking into consideration, yes, it's a technical job when it comes to relocation, but there are also mobility needs or persons who would like to, families who would like to live together. So from my experience, what I saw that colleagues were taking all those into consideration when planning and during and even also after the relocation is taking place, making sure that all those needs are met and vulnerable groups are identified.
I mean, one of the guidance that we've also developed is also looking at how to mitigate GBV risk in site planning, and which also, we also done some workshops in Nigeria and also in Bangladesh. In Nigeria, we also developed like the safety audit for the teams on the ground to carry out, to basically be able to monitor the kind of level of safety and security that people feel within the sites, and how to best mitigate those measures.
Okay, so having said that, thank you very much, Man, for sharing all your experience with CCCM and protection. Now maybe we can talk to Laura who is at the moment the Regional Data Hub Coordinator based in Aro, Nairobi. She's going to be sharing her experience with us in DTM team, where she was based previously in Iraq. Over to you, Laura. So how did you make sure that protection concerns are integrated in DTM?
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Good. So, mainstreaming of protection, gender, or also child protection started several years ago in IOM and mainly in the DTM. For the benefit of everyone, DTM is the Displacement Tracking Matrix program, that it is the information management platform of the organization. And by now, it is composed of a rich variety of tools that can be used in different displacement situations, as well as return and mainly migration at the moment. And it is more, I would say, of 5 years that the close collaboration between the DTM and the gender AOR, or anyway UNFPA, and other relevant protection actors have been shaped. And initially, we can say that there are different levels. It can be just about agreeing on a set of key indicators that can be collected through the DTM. The DTM has a great value added that usually we have an extensive coverage. So through our teams, usually we have a very significant presence in even in the case of Iraq, that was a country with very limited access, we were able to cover all the governorates in Iraq. Or other times, we can also design specific assessment that in the case of one was mentioning the safety audit. The safety audit is a specific assessment that aims to assess protection and gender risk at the site level, mainly through proxy indicator, because of course there are the DTM, there are different methodologies. So according, that's of course is important to consult with the focal person in the DTM HQ, or because there is by now a significant practice or different lesson learned from other countries. So according to which is the methodology, as for instance at the site level, we will go for proxy indicators. So we will not be in contact directly with the victims or anyway with the other IDPs or people living in the site, but rather than we will be speaking with representatives of the different groups residing in the site. And as such, they could be able to give us information about protection risk related to the site layout, lightening the washing facilities, or also distribution of how the different services in terms of water, school, and so on are located inside the site. But of course, they could be only able to give information about the vulnerabilities of the population as a group. So, and according to which type of protection risk concern in Iraq, that was an advanced implementation of a collaboration between DTM and protection actors, we have developed SOP, so standard operating procedures, with both the protection cluster and the various subclusters, so GBV as well as child protection, that according to the level of risk identified during the assessment would have different form of referral. So for the very high risk, and here we are speaking, for instance, if it was reported that armed forces were in the site, or again, if they were reported that some people had suffered some abuses. In that case, there would be a direct referral through phone call to the focal person in the relevant cluster, as well as any other organization competent to manage that mandate in country. Other instead information that were medium risk, that were maybe just related to the need of more light in the toilet or locks in the latrine or anyway partition between the household to keep privacy, that would be medium kind of priority and would be referred to the operational cluster, so the WASH, the shelter NFI, and the CCCM for their follow-up. And then there would be the low-level type of information that would just be the vulnerabilities profiling, the sex and age disaggregated data, and all this kind of other data that support to design intervention in this context, but as such do not provide any direct information. They don't have any kind of danger for the population as such. Another significant in Iraq, there was the luxury or the privilege that the program was very large. So we could have a dedicated person that was focusing in mainstreaming protection in the program, but mainly to interact with the various protection cluster and the other protection partners. Because of course, all this, in order to design all this type of assessment, it requires a very intense engagement with the relevant actors. Not only they need to be aware of the type of assessment and which kind of information they will be available, so that after they can plan their intervention. Because that is a mistake that we did at the beginning. We designed a very quite significant, quite rich assessment, we roll out, but then partners were not ready to receive it. So at the end, there was all this pool of data in a complex and conflict-affected country as Iraq and limited access, and it was very hard for many of the partners or other, anyway, actors to follow up or to use this data to inform the response, because they were not being informed enough in advance and get prepared for this kind of operation. So we went a long way in Iraq, both in terms of designing all this assessment together with the relevant cluster, both in terms of having these SOPs endorsed with the corresponding referral mechanism for the type of information and level of risk identified. And finally, we also succeeded to organize a GBV mainstreaming workshop that was attended by the global AOR with the support, of course, of colleagues in the DTM Global in Geneva, where we brought together the cluster lead as well as information management officer of the main operational cluster and protection cluster. And we try to map out all the protection mainstreaming indicators that they were present in the major assessment in Iraq, which were many. There were lots of assessments done in Iraq. And so it came out, it was that by mapping by sector, by WASH or by type of threat. So for instance, if people could not access health facilities, whether because they were armed forces or whether they were a group of male and women who did not feel comfortable. There are also the cultural situation in Iraq that each country is different and so on. So we had all this group of work, either by sector or either by team. And that was the beginning. Of course, it would require more work, but one of the main findings is that there were plenty of indicators, plenty, of course, of already type, at least in data, from the data point of view of mainstreaming of this indicator. But of course, most after the problem was the follow-up, either to monitor how these data were feeding into operation, and then what was the implementation after it. Much more again in a context as Iraq, where most of in the case, for instance, of the Mosul response, where all of a sudden they established many emergency sites and emergency camp, they call it, because they were set up in a very quickly span of time. So not all of them were immediately up to the sphere standard. And so the partner was saying, we have such a short time, we don't have access, we have to go with private contractors. How much do you think we can tell them that the latrines, should look at that direction and the women latrines should be divided there and then at the other facility? So it was a bit, we were trying to see how we, from a data point of view, we could provide a package or an information product that could be easily digestible and used by the operational partners. And the operational partners were trying as well to share which were their main challenges to ensure that the implementation of all those principles that most of the communities, by now humanitarian communities, aware in high emergency type. Finally, the last I would like also to add that recently, since the last year, DTM has started also collaboration with the UNICEF and the Global Education Cluster and the Global Child Protection Cluster, in order also to further refined or anyway and support the mainstreaming of child protection type of indicators in the DTM. And so there is at the moment is a full-time specialist that has been also visiting the several DTM operations and meeting not only with DTM, but also with the various child protection counterparts in order to see again how to strengthen that type of collaboration as we proceed in developing the methodology and understanding how best we can support, the cluster system.
Thank you very much, Laura, for sharing all those valuable experience with regards to and giving us, making us understand concretely how it can work in practice with DTM and protection, the coordination aspect side of it. Maybe we can now go back to our presentation and continue with then how to mainstream protection. But before that, I would like to remind that through the chat in the YouTube, you can share your questions or comments or feedback if you want to share, which we are going to be able to receive. So now I would like to continue with my presentation quickly, if I can share my screen again. All right. Okay. So when it comes to mainstream protection, so how shall we do that? So there are different ways of being engaged in protection mainstream. Already Van and Laura has underlined through their experience and examples some of them. So the first is going to be capacity building. So IOM has a training package that is available in our intranet, which is prepared for protection mainstreaming purposes, and it has 3 different modules. This is an internal tool. That's why it's available in IOM intranet. And it has different modules divided into 3. First is protection mainstreaming across project development life cycle. There are the second module is on protection mainstreaming and different thematic areas, be it gender mainstreaming, child protection, or CT in crisis, etc. And then there is an application of protection mainstreaming part of it. The good thing about these sources are that all the materials with PowerPoint slides, explanations, examples are available, and the entire package, training package, is available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. Other than this, we have awareness raising can be one of them. Like today, what we're doing is actually kind of also an awareness raising and making sure that we know what services or what resources are available out there within IOM. Strategic guidance, we have user-friendly tools, which I'm going to be talking about in the detail. And the last one is going to be coordination and partnership. As we already said, IOM adheres to the definition of protection mainstreaming and approach of the global protection cluster. And colleagues already underlined how they were collaborating in field with different areas of responsibilities, be it GBV AOR, child protection AOR, and different working groups. So in terms of the available sources that we have currently within IOM, as said, we have 2 different actually protection mainstreaming websites. One of them is internal, which is in the intranet under the humanitarian policy platform, and the other one is in the internet through IOM web page on protection mainstreaming, and we are trying to keep it as updated as possible, where you can find our guidance note and in its annexes and IOM's different work. For example, our work on child protection in emergencies, our protection portfolio, mainstreaming GBV prevention and risk mitigation information sheet, we have a specific brochure on IOM's work on protection mainstreaming, and we have also different videos on protection mainstreaming and general IOM's work and centrality of protection within IOM. Most of those videos are also available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. I have already underlined that we have annexes of the internal guidance note IN 232. There are 5 different annexes, which we can call them as tools to be used. The first one is on situation and vulnerability analysis, which provides us some questions that should be taken into account when conducting situation or vulnerability analysis. So sample questions with regards to do no harm or safety, or with regards to participation. And then we have another annex tool, which is project development and endorsement. This is when we are developing our projects or endorsing projects with protection component, or that we would like to have protection being mainstreamed. We have set of questions under each protection mainstreaming principle, and also indicators to be included in project log frames. Maybe here we can also underline that increasing the donors are also interested in providing or asking projects having key protection mainstream indicators. ECHO is one of them, for example. They have started a pilot in some countries where they asked their partners to include protection mainstreaming indicators specifically, and there's a plan to make it mandatory for all the projects that are submitted. So that's going to be like a mandatory when we want to have funding from ECHO. So the other annex we have is project monitoring and evaluation. Again, it comes with some indicators that can be used for monitoring and evaluation purposes. We have another tool for at-risk profiles. So taking the individual and other factors into account still in terms of vulnerability, this is a tool which lists different profiles which could be at heightened risk in a crisis condition. And then there are also sector-specific minimum standards which are prepared as per each 15 AMCOF sectors of assistance, where you can find, for example, minimum standards when it is about shelter or NFI or livelihoods. The other tool is resources that are available out there is through the Global Protection Cluster. Already all resources are in line with Global Protection Cluster, and they have different guidance and tools. There is, for example, a protection mainstreaming training package, which is available in various different languages. And there are also specific guidance when it comes to different sector intervention. For example, minimum standards of protection in WASH, in health, shelter, CCCM, food, education, or livelihoods. So, and lastly, they have a protection mainstreaming application, which you can download on your smartphones, where you can have access to different sources, and also there is a plan to provide some context-specific sources for protection mainstreaming as well through that app, which is very user-friendly and easy to reach. And lastly, because I have talked a lot, we have also our DOE protection web email group, which in addition to all those resources, which you can always reach out to ask any questions you have, or ask for sources or feedback, which is DOE protection at IOM, INT, where we have a group of colleagues working here in HQ in different units who are going to be able to support you in different thematic areas as well. So this is internally a go-to point when it comes to protection and protection mainstreaming related issues. So if you can back to Okay, we have, I think, some questions, but before that, maybe we can quickly recap some of the elements that we have already discussed through examples before going to our question. With regards to this webinar and with regards to protection mainstreaming in general. So we discussed that we have 4 key elements of protection mainstreaming, and they are interdependent and mutually reinforcing, meaning that we need to be working on all of them all together. So unfortunately we cannot be selective, because many of the aspects, for example, we discussed with regards to securing meaningful access are relevant to participation, or the issues that we discussed with regards to accountability has something to do with participation. So they're really interdependent and mutually reinforcing. The idea is it is quite essential for a quality programming. So it aims at ensuring that certain principles are there and there is a quality in our approach. It requires intentional proactive steps towards making some changes in our projects, programs, or policies. And it has an aspect of actually changing perspectives on how we do things rather than what we are doing currently. When I personally provide trainings on protection mainstreaming, which we have a module like that lasts for a day long, I always remind colleagues that yes, we are aiming at clearing some of the points and answering some of the questions and having clear discussions on what those principles are with examples and activities. But moreover, the overall aim is always to have more question marks in people's mind about the way that they have been implementing their activities up until now, and how they can further challenge themselves and change some of the project activities that have already been out there already. If you are conducting a focus group discussion, then my question is, yes, focus group discussion is a very important tool, and it's a tool that we use very frequently to reach out to different people. But the question is then, who is involved in that focus group discussion? So to make sure that it is participatory with regards to the targeted population we are aiming at. I think that's more or less all from my side to say on protection mainstreaming. We have a question, I guess. Okay, so we have a question asking about how do you make sure, or how do you mainstream protection when you don't manage the projects, or sometimes there can be a resistance to the suggested changes. I think practically that's, I mean, in practice in the field, that is more or less the case. I see potential 2 answers to that question. First one is that we have already underlined that our internal guidance note is mandatory in compliance. It doesn't mean that it's going to be fully implemented maybe everywhere because of various different challenges. And this is a quick answer, I am aware. But the other answer to that question is going to be, so, and my personal advocacy on protection mainstreaming is the added value of protection mainstreaming in different projects, because protection mainstreaming is there to make sure that we don't create, for example, any negative consequences, or that the NFIs that we are distributing are culturally appropriate, or that we are really reaching out to the most in need. Meaning that protection mainstreaming has an added value to different projects as well. There could be resistance or different understanding, but this is to make sure that in different programs there are quality assurance measures in place, And I'm sure none of the project managers would want to purchase 10,000 NFIs and then end up they being not used just because they're not culturally appropriate, right? So it has indeed very practical, efficient added values to different projects. And the last point on that is that protection mainstreaming is not the responsibility of protection actors or protection officers only. It is a shared responsibility of all actors or all the sectors. Like today we were having discussions with colleagues working in CCCM and DTM. So it is the responsibility of all actors that are out there, or it will only be possible if different actors play their own role, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also possible to address the issue kind of not directly about the project, but maybe, you know, like kind of as the office, whether you do trainings or sessions on mainstreaming, and not necessarily just attacking a particular project, but looking at as an overall, like in your office or you know, sub office. So you can also approach it as making a more general kind of discussion or trainings for the mission.
Yeah.
I mean, we do also, I just wanted to say, because we've been working a lot to mainstream like protection and GBV prevention mitigation into our CCCM training package, which is also something that, you know, can be requested as well. And I'm sure it'll be the same for protection mainstreaming. As you say, for protection, we also work a lot with the protection cluster, the GBV-AOR. So I think the available resources, I mean, you know, do feel free to reach out. I think the DOE protection email address is a useful one to take a note of. And then also see what, you know, resources we have available to support.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add more, Laura, on that?
Just maybe, which I fully understand. There is now some extra audio. So not sure. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well. Go ahead, please.
That it's not easy when, for instance, some programs have not included the protection mainstreaming component, the type of assessment or communication with affected population, feedback mechanism, and so on and so forth, that might have been included in the initial design of a project. So most of the time it requires a sincere engagement from both sides, both from those who are implementing their technical or type of emergency response operation program, and unwilling to understand how they can integrate part of this aspect. On the other hand, also the protection colleague, because I've been working a lot with them, they have to understand that maybe sometimes there are progress or steps, so they cannot just come in with the all-in, and because no, you know, sometimes it would require more staffing or more dedicated resources in order to implement some type of more. So all of this should be considered by the two sides, because most of the time it's not that there's gonna lack of interest or not perception of the importance of this intervention, of this mainstreaming. But sometimes there are also operational challenges and the limitation of resources or other priorities. So all of this should be factored in with a very open and ready, flexible mind.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Laura. I think we don't have any more questions and we are getting close to our time. So I would like to maybe a couple of points before closure. So all the sources that are mentioned within the training, I'm going to be sharing with an email with all of you. This webinar has also been recorded, so which you will receive, and you can share within your offices if colleagues have not been able to make it now. And I would like to thank Juan and Laura for their time and for their valuable contributions to today's webinar. I hope you all enjoyed and we were clear in our messages, and I would like to also thank Ismail for his technical support. I think without him, this webinar and most of other webinars that we conduct would not be possible. So I guess that's all from our side on today's webinar. You can still send questions through, you have my email or DOE protection if there are any other questions that hasn't been addressed here. So, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for initiating. I think.
And to, yes, facilitate this. Ciao.
See you.